Anytime you need some inspiration, just watch that. P-51, Cadillac of the Sky. Okay, Cadillac of the Sky. Now with the epoxy drying on the nose, we're going to come back to this tomorrow morning. Just too late to even get a start on here. Anyway, we will come back in the morning, get the top block zipped up, canopy, rudder, bottom block, a lot of stuff left to do on this. Itching to get some of it going. Now what I've done is I've taken this and just carefully tacked about every 6 inches with thin CA to make sure I don't have any gaps, any big fat spots or anything. And now what I'll do to last, and this is a good little trick if you haven't done it this way, get it down in this dimension so the CA flows right in. Start right at the end of the epoxy and work a joint right in here. Another good way to do this, if you don't like doing it this way, is just use pieces of masking tape about every 3 inches until you get the thing lined up. And of course give it, well, if it's not loose anywhere. Now we have the epoxy in the front that's dry. I'll go and do the other one off camera. And we'll be ready to start working on a tail post. Now at both of the sides nice. I got this nailed down. There's a little, I wanted to show this, there's a little bit of a gap right up here. Now what I want to do is make a little shim, get some real soft, maybe 16th balsa, and make little wedges and shove them in there, trim them off with a razor, and hit that with CA. That'll hold the tail in a little stronger. Now this is a little wedge of soft balsa. I just make a wedge like a cedar shake shingle. Press it in till it doesn't want to go anymore, and I'll trim this off with a brand new razor blade. Now what I can do is just put a drop of thin CA in there to hold it until I actually do the final sand, and press that little wedge in there. Get a little drop of thin CA in there. I basically have to do the same thing over here, cut a little wedge, fill that in, just like what we've already done over here. And this is ready for sanding. Getting that nice tight fit there, because we don't want to have some kind of big blobby fillet there. I want that to be a nice blend from the fuse side right in there, and of course I'll dress that off with a sanding block later. Now a good idea, we're going to put the canopy on next. Because here's what I want to do. I want to have the canopy drying, the epoxy on the canopy drying, and I want to make that tail post up so one can be drying while I'm working on the other. Good tip, always take Windex and clean the inside of the canopy of all fingerprints and all who knows what else, and make sure you don't have, you know, who knows what in there. Something, a bug or something floating around, because once you seal this guy up, you can't get back in there conveniently. Make sure there's no dust in there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix up some slow drying epoxy, 45-minute epoxy, and get a thin bead right in that little ditch where we made the cutout for the plastic. Then what I want to do is just drop this in ever so slightly and put some tape holding it on. I don't want the tape pressing it down real hard, just holding it in place so that all the epoxy has a good grip here. And if I have to, I can put pins around the edge, either one or the other. But the worst thing to do is put tape on it so tight and then the canopy goes, you know, and it starts to look like, who knows what, like the Munsters or something. Anyway, that'll be that. We'll mix up some epoxy, get that cranking along here. And of course we'll do a last little check fit here that just verify that we haven't lost any of the alignment. It sits right in that little ditch that we made. Now I like to have where one tube is bigger than the other. That's slow drying. Gives you about 45 minutes working time. You don't want to get to this point and then have to rush through. You want to be real careful getting that epoxy down into that little groove. Now I'm just going to go around this ever so slowly and just get the epoxy right in the groove. This is why you want to use slow drying, because this is going to take a few minutes. And what will happen if you, you know, say if you were using 5 minute here or something, oh my God, and it starts kicking off and you don't have the canopy lined up, I want to have a full 15 minutes to get this in alignment. Now another thing I used to do years ago, and it's a good trick if you think you're going to have a problem with the canopy not sticking well or whatever, is all along the bottom edge put 1,000 little pinholes. That seems to give it a better anchor. This is such a small canopy, and we have a nice little ridge it's going to rest in. I don't really, to me that's almost like overkill. Anyway, I'll get the rest of this epoxy in, get it all night right in that little ditch, smear it right in. Whatever oozes out we'll wipe out before we even put the canopy in. Now I have the whole ditch filled, and what I'm doing, I'm just taking my nice clean Q-tips and wiping right around the edge. Get as much of the excess off as you can. The more you can get off, of course, just makes for nicer sanding. You know, my wife doesn't understand how I go through 2 boxes of Q-tips in the shop every time we go shopping. Well, hey, Karen. And she wants to know why I don't use both ends. Yeah, well, Karen, come on. Building planes costs money. Anyway, the Q-tips are definitely a good tool here. Getting that ditch filled with just the right amount of epoxy. Now, the next trick, after you're all done with this part of it, is get your hands clean. Make sure the canopy's clean inside. Man, I've put a whole canopy together. I don't remember if it was my Skylark or what. Get all done with it. I look inside and there's the biggest fingerprint, a big Polish fingerprint right inside. Well, needless to say, that didn't make my day complete. Get the hands Windex down nice and clean. The moment is at hand. Just drop this in. This is voodoo stunt. Sticking all these pins in here. Anyway, they're in just lightly pressing the canopy together. The tape is very lightly holding it in place, and I've been monitoring this, I guess, for the last 10-15 minutes. I just don't want to walk away, come back, and the thing goes pop and it's up in the air or something. So I'm going to basically sit and monitor this. I don't even want to work on a plane for another 10 minutes. I'll go have a cup of coffee. You know, that's that other thing I made the point on the last video, patience, not trying to rush things. Oh, like right now, if this was a couple of years ago, I'd be working on a tail and flip the plane over, forget the pins are in there, and anyway, the patience part of this, I hope I have a little bit, thanks to Karen. She's the one that whips me into shape all the time. Anyway, I'm going to let that dry up. Hopefully get the tape and pins off and whatever, and then start working up this little tail post. Now, I can at least be thinking about how I want to do this. I want to make a 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch tail post. Now what that'll actually be is like a spar, because keep in mind this rudder, the way I've designed up the body, the rudder is only supported by that fillet on the elevators and stab. So now what I want to do is go from the bottom to the top with a piece of, well, mildly hard wood anyway. So that'll act as a stiffener and act as a mounting post for the Ray rudder. And the trick, now I've heard this from Jim and I've heard it from Mike, and we're going to try to live with this. This is now one of the official dimensions of the Greenway program, is that the end of the elevators to the beginning of the Ray rudder hinge line should be a 1/2 inch. We've made them closer, made them further apart, but a 1/2 inch seems to be just about the right number on that. So keep that in mind for the future. Now what I did, I took a little piece of, this is medium hard wood, because I want this to act as a, like a spar, give this rudder some support. Just roughly cut that in. Actually, it's pretty good. I want to get that sanded right in, because that's going to also be, of course it's going to change the shape of the rudder a little bit, but I want to maintain that dimension of a 1/2 inch from the end of the elevators to the beginning of the Ray rudder. Now you can see how I've got one side of this block sanded right in. And now what I'm going to do is just reverse everything and block sand this side in. This side's still rough, still unmatched. This side, we'll hit this with some 320 and a block, blend that right in. Now, I took a little break from this and worked on the Daily Mail. I feel like Lindbergh flying a mail here. Anyway, one of the things I really enjoy about this hobby, and I really get a sense of satisfaction from this, is the correspondence I have with the, well, I could say hundreds, it's probably more than hundreds. These people watch the videos or read these crazy columns that I write, and then they come up with ideas, of which we've had many, but this is one of the best ones. Now, this was sent in by Oscar Vanez. Oscar Vanez was either overseas or in Disneyland or something for a while, but he does get all the tapes, and he's always coming up with nice letters, nice little Christmas wishes, and you know, that kind of a thing. But he came up with a great idea. These are like giant wheel collars. Now, if you've watched the beginning of this video set or other video sets where we built Midgley's wing or whoever's wing, the rods are constantly rocking on the mounts. Well, what these are, giant wheel collars, you can put one on each side of the rod where it goes through either the aluminum or plywood block, lock them down. They fit right over the rods perfectly. This is an absolutely jewel-like tip. I can't get over that. I didn't, you know, a brain like me, Frankenstein's brain, didn't think of this earlier. But again, here's the whole deal. You get a good idea like this. Now, if you live out in Bumblejinsky, you have a great idea, you use it. Okay, yeah, fine. But now, because Oscar is willing to share this with us, now I hope the 40 or 45 people getting these videos every day or every month or whatever, they can also use this idea, but it'll encourage them to contribute an idea, and all I become is the clearinghouse. You know, I'm just a guy like the cop directing traffic or whatever, or directing hookers on 42nd Street. Anyway, good idea. And by the way, what these will really be nice for, I can picture this as if you build a plane with really big landing gear. You can 3/8 landing. I'll show these to George. Maybe he can use them on his RC Tsunami. Anyway, I appreciate these ideas. I appreciate all this stuff. And what I did, and I've said it on the beginning of the tape, time for a cup of coffee. The whole idea of the tapes is not only to learn from them, but to share the information, share the ideas. The same way Stunt News becomes a vehicle for sharing good ideas, the tapes are a good idea. Flying Models is a good idea. Frank McMillan's column is a good idea. But if you don't have any ideas, if nobody contributes things, what happens is sooner or later you burn out. You just run out of things to talk about, and then you go mumbling off in some crazy direction. The idea being, if other people contribute ideas, and boy, for this crash repair column, I just got a bunch of stuff from Mike Dietrich and from Lowell Reinhardt. A lot of guys contributing into this, so it's really a good thing. With that in mind, I'm going to finish my coffee. Everything should be dry over there, and fit up the rudder. I'm really excited. I may have this plane in one piece before the weekend gets here. And this weekend we have our stunt party. It's Borelli time, Lampione time, who the hell knows who else time. Guys that wander in off the street aimlessly. It's going to be the Christmas party from hell. We've been promised nude women, strippers. Of course, they're all going to be men. But anyway, we should have a good time. Thanks, Oscar. Appreciate it a whole lot. Now, the reason I took that coffee break, and believe me, it's a good idea to have a cup of coffee once in a while or something, take an injection of heroin. Because it took me a lot longer to sand this little piece in. It's a little goddamn little piece here. And boy, did it take a long time to get sanded in to where I was happy that this all tapered in, this fit, around the fillet fit. I want, fussy that I am. All the pinholes that we had from putting that template on the previous video, I have them dapped in. I got some of this kind of shaped in. Have the blend from the back of the tail. Of course, I left it oversized so I can trim it right when the block is in place. And now what I want to do is get the hinge pockets cut and get the rudder fitted on there, and then start to get a look at, do I really like that rudder shape? Because of course it's not too late to change it. Or whatever I'm going to do from this point on. Right now I want to get that rudder on and, well, either fall in love with it, marry it, divorce it, or put it in an envelope and send it to Lampione. I don't know yet. Now remember, when I made this rudder, I purposely, you can see how much oversized I actually made it. I always believe, at least one of the things I believe, is you should always leave the rudder way lower than it really has to be, and then after the block is installed or the sheet bottom, then put the final cut in there. That's a good tip. Same thing with the wing tips. You never make the tips of the elevators until you have the horn in, the hinges in, everything sanded. The last thing you do is make the final fits around the top and the bottom here. So this stuff is purposely, and of course you can see this is purposely left oversized. Same thing with this guy here, purposely oversized. Now we're going to put him on. I took and got a little, let's see, we got a little center line going up and down the rudder. I'll have to mark out where the hinge pockets are, cut the hinge pockets, and then I can look at this from the side view and get some idea of whether it's going to Lampione or Midgley, or if I'm going to keep it. Now I just want to put the dots the same exact way I did to get where my hinge pockets are going to go. And because this is thin 1/4 inch wood, what I'm going to do is just take a number 11 blade, break the end off, and gouge out a little bit of a hinge slot there. I don't know, maybe I like that rudder. It won't be too bad. And of course now I just cut in between the dots. Now, one of the things I've done, hey, let's be honest about this. One of the things I've done is start at the wrong dot, so that everywhere there should be a gap I had a slot. Yeah, I've done that. So I'll be real careful to start at the right dot and not make them opposite of how they should be. Now this look, I don't know if anybody out there either likes this look or doesn't like it or what. This idea of having a hinge, a gap, a hinge, equal spacing, kind of looks like a piano hinge. I don't know. Kind of looks like, I don't know what. I like a piano. Anyway, I didn't know if I was going to like this look until I finished it, but it's one of the things that, as I'm going along building a plane, I kind of do like it. I kind of like the fact all the hinges line up. Who knew until you do it? These are the kind of things you don't know. Until you do them, you don't know if you're going to like them. So. Now with the hinges installed, I try to get a little bit of a look from a lot of different angles here to see if I really like this. The best thing is just look from a lot of different angles, because we still can change this, of course. We still can make a change here. And we're working within some specific parameters. We have a 10 square inch rudder. It's working off some very specific dimensions, the dimensions of a large Dubrow horn. Again, all that's been on the video before. Now with all the hinges in here, the next thing I want to do is get a real good sanding job so that the hinges just fit right in there. And I just have the little hinge pockets. I want to have a nice taper in that. And I'll spend probably an hour or so, half hour, whatever. I really do like that. Didn't think I was going to like this. I don't know. I was very skeptical about that rudder shape. But it kind of does fit. Now we don't have the bottom block on, of course. What I have to do is eventually, before we really go crazy, is put the spinner and the bottom block and everything on. Take it out in the driveway, march off 70 paces and take a look at it. See if you like it, because if you don't like it, this is a good time to change it before you go and get married. Okay, kind of got a nice fit on that. Now here's a really good tip. When you're going to put the final sanding on these, even when you have the tissue on or after, you want to get the hinges in there and then do the sanding. This way the hinges usually puff the wood up just a little bit, and this way you get the sanding done. You'll take out the high spots. And when you put the final, because this plane will be buffed out before we actually have the hinges in, you won't have those little fat puckers in there. It's a real little quality touch you can do. Just whenever you're going to work on this end of the plane, try to get the hinges in. And eventually you'll feel you have it perfect. And that's what we're looking for. And what I'll probably do is, when I silk span it, I'll make sure the silk span goes over this joint and wraps around, so I'll have a little extra meat in here, and then block sand it down with the hinges in place. Good little tip. Yeah, that's a good fit. Now one of the goals I always have is when I'm all finished, and I'm not really finished yet, but I'm starting to see it in my mind, is get the whole fuselage together, and everything from the elevator hinge line back, I like to block sand in until it's kind of soft and a little bit even flexible. Because all this weight, any weight you can get off back here, multiplies by a power of 1.8 into what you can take out of the nose. So even if you can get 5 grams out of the back of the plane, well, that's almost an ounce. By the time it multiplies up into the nose moment arm. So I'm going to, and I'll do it off camera, I'm going to start at the hinge line here and try to thin this out from the hinge line back, block sand it as thin as I can. I also have to make this little piece that goes in here. I don't like having this open. I'm going to just go make a pattern up and make that little piece that goes under there. Now from this point in the construction from now on, we're going to be basically dealing with the plane upside down for a while. So what I did, I took my old foam thing that I use in planes that are in here. I usually have some oil or don't have some oil or whatever. A little cradle, and obviously you could make one of these something similar to this up. But I want to just not forget to put some paper towels or whatever, or get it nice and clean so we don't start getting greasy fingerprints on this as we work on it. Let's see, what I wasn't sure of when I laid this out, I didn't know exactly how much clearance I'd need for the ball link. I didn't want to have you know, a piece here and then not have clearance for the bowling. So now that I know what a clearance is, I can get a little piece of, well, 1/8 inch, 1/16, anything, just to get in there and fill that little gap up. And I'll do that the same way I make all my patterns. Just make a little pattern out of 1/16 balsa cardboard, kind of fit it in, do the sheetrock method, find all the hard spots, and then try to get it glued in. Okay, now here's a typical little thing that may help you when you have to make up an odd-shaped part like that. You see, I made, this is just 16th balsa, just made a little pattern, and I say, oh yeah, where is it fitting, where is it not fitting? Yeah, I can take a little amount out here. Just constantly shave away at it. Now, if you go too far, then you just make the part over, and in this case, that's what we've done. I'll make this part over, and just extend. You can see I have a gap in here. Extend this up 1/16 of an inch and I'll probably have it. But it's easier if you keep shaving away at it until you're real close to having what you want. And even if you go a little too far, just make an extra part up. Now in this case I still need a little more off the back. Making these little odd shaped parts is one of the things that I think most people, at least that have worked in this shop, when they get to a thing of having to make up a little part like this from a pattern, they don't really feel confident making up a pattern. Now we have it, but you can see we just have to make the part exactly the same and make it 1/16 bigger right across the whole top, and we'll have it. Now I did the same thing. I just took the original pattern, made a piece, and this is even a little bit bigger than it has to be. So now I'll just find the spots where it's going to be a little bit too large. Looks like I could take just a little bit off the top and I'll have it. It's just a question of having the patience to go back and forth, You know, find the spot where it's hitting hard. It's hitting hard right up here. Wherever you see a hard spot, I can see I still didn't take enough off. And it's still a question of just being patient. I know that sounds like, you know, like, oh yeah, well so what, you know, it's like a little thing, but it's a major piece of modeling. Being able to get little pieces of wood to fit real nice is not a little tiny thing, it's kind of a big thing. And this is one of those little details I want to have just right. I actually have this piece so tight now that it's a press fit in there. Anyway, I just hope that's one of the things you can really pick up off the video, is how to make a nice little part, nice little filler gap. Now what you want to do, to be able to sand in there, you want to have a sanding block with a little pie-shaped edge on it. So I'm going to take one of my sanding blocks, put a little angle on it. See, that angle lets you get down in there. That's the whole trick to getting that sanded nice. Now here's where this stuff that Jimmy brought, this sticky back sandpaper, really comes in handy. We can make a little sanding block with that little angle on it. This is that sticky back sandpaper, and I got some fine here, and just by attaching it, then I could trim up the edge here. Now with that angle, you can see, trim the sandpaper and radius this off with a sanding block, radius all these edges. This little point allows you to dig right into that area and get a beautifully flat, smooth surface. Always radius those edges off, get rid of the corners or you're going to dig it up. Now you have a nice block. You work this area real nice. Just be fussy, take your time, and I'm sure that's a tip you can put to use real quick. Between making these little patterns and making a proper sanding block, you can make just about any shape on the planet. Okay, the next piece I have to work on, I have to make the tail wheel. Take a little piece of plywood, piece of wire, wire it to it, get the tail wheel in position. First step is get a piece of, and this is just a piece of scrap 16th wood, and make a little pattern, roughly a pattern for the shape of the plywood you need. Okay, from that original pattern, make up a piece of 16th plywood, bend up the tail wheel wire to whatever shape you think it's going to be, trace that out. Now we're going to put holes all around the edge of this 64th drill size and then lace some wire onto it. Okay, what I use is 75 thousandths wire. Wrap it, shoelace it, however, and then while the glue is still wet, press it right down into a piece of 1/4 inch wood. So that 1/4 inch wood now is a mount that mounts the whole piece of plywood right into the tail position. Nice, neat, quick way to do it. And 75 thousandths wire is an oddball size. It's in between 16th and 3/32, so it's probably something you want to buy a couple pieces of and keep in stock just for tail wheels. About the only thing you can use it for is tail wheels. Okay, next step is I'm going to fit up the bottom block. Now here's just another one of those little gems of a... I already shut the light off here. I wanted to make sure I put this on the video. What happened, I taped up the top block, the bottom block here, got it all put in position, went to use my CA, my trusty CA, and noticed that there's virtually none left. So, rather than use up old glue, what I did, I used it to tack this in position. The tape holds it in position. Had Rich Peabody here, he helped me tape it in position. We got it there, but it's not glued in. Now what I'm going to do is, and it's going to be too late when I get back to work on this, I'm going to run down to the, believe it or not, to our local RC hobby shop and buy some glue. And then tomorrow I'll start afresh, anew, or whatever. But there's a good lesson to be learned there. Keep track of the glue. You can see I got 4 gallons of kicker and no glue. Anyway, just my own fault, and it cost me a couple hours at a building session. Dummy. What I did get, and my wife brought it home today. This is, I guess, my Christmas present anyway. You saw that woman, Joe, that was on the video? Polkas. Alright, so we'll have some polka music. This is the guy we went to see in concert. We'll have some polka music. Hard to believe after embarrassing running out of CA here. Anyway, I had mentioned this before, but it might be worth remembering. It's Teflon tubing. I want to make that little tip. It is important because we're going to try to get this on its side and run. Now we have it tacked in place with the old glue we had here yesterday, but I want to get one bead run right across, turn it around and get one bead run across the other side. Now the only tubing I've found that doesn't clog up on a pretty regular basis is this yellow, and I bought this in Radio Shack, ICO Rally Corporation, Palo Alto. Anyway, and I take a little piece, just clip this off so it's a nice tight fit, and just have, I don't know how much, one roll of masking tape around the joint just so the tube just doesn't slide in and out. This is the only reasonable way I've found, but every other way clogs up. What a pain in the neck. Now we can take the cowl off since this is tacked in position. We don't need the cowl there. I don't want to wind up gluing the cowling in place. I want to get all this tape off little by little. carefully, of course. Now I want to run that bead right down, and I'll hold this on its side. Get a nice bead. As I'm doing it, it's already tacked in place, lined up. I guess it'll help too that this is nice, brand new, fresh. Who really knows how long this has been in a hobby shop, though. Anyway, we're lucky in the fact that Jim Damarel found an RC type hobby shop not far from here that has fresh glue all the time. Now usually this is the best way, is just rest the nose on a table that I know of, so that the CA tends to go down in there. Now one thing I just realized is this is really nice fresh CA. You definitely won't even need kicker on it. I just did a little test. And I guess that's an important lesson to be learned is, you know, CA has a shelf life. If you're trying to use up stuff that's a year old, I was just going to do another couple inches, let it dry, another couple inches, go right down the whole fuse side. Look for any spots where the joint isn't nice and tight. This looks pretty good though, not too bad. Then we can pull all those pins and tape off the canopy, see how that dried up. Now also a good trick while I'm doing these joints is I'm getting down and letting the thin CA get right down inside. All it is, in other words, with this, now gravity is pulling the glue on the inside of that joint. Nothing really more annoying than you look at one of these planes when it's a year old and you see the glue joints starting to loosen up. Really is frustrating. Anyway, now what I can see the glue oozing out this little joint here. Okay. So I know I'm getting plenty down in there. Now I have the joint glued from the inside and the outside both. Okay, that bottom block is sitting on there nice and solid. Now I'm going to pull all the pins out of the canopy, take that off and kind of look at it. But here's the main thing I'm going to be doing now. Pretty much I have a couple little spots here. I have the back of the rudder I have to fill in. There's a little gap there. I have to trim it off. I have to pack some wood around the tail wheel wire so oil doesn't get in there. But what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to start looking at one piece of the fuselage at a time. And I don't think I'm going to get a whole lot of this done today because we really have limited time here with Christmas coming and everything. I want to pick, and this is a good way to do it, I want to pick one section of the fuselage at a time. Let's say from the nose ring to the leading edge. Sand this area out. Really final sand it out with some 320 and 400. Get it perfect. CA over the joints 4 or 5 times and blend the joints in. Then I want to go from the leading edge, say, to the trailing edge and just do that area. Stop. Next area from the flap hinge line to the elevators. Do that area. Then maybe the rudder. Then maybe flip it over and start working my way back in segments. If you'll find out, if you segment out a sanding job, it's a lot easier and a lot simpler and a lot more productive than if you just attack it randomly. If you just start sanding and you'll miss spots and go back and forth over spots that are already sanded. I always like to start at the nose, work my way to the back, turn it over, and then go from the back to the front. Then even when I'm sanding the first coat, say after I put the clear on, I'll hit it before the tissue, I'll sand it. Start at the front, work to the back. Start at the front, work to the back. Now there's other little details we have to do, fillets, flap fillets and everything yet, but I'm still, in my mind, I'm still looking at this and trying to decide, yeah, is there still anything I want to change? Is there anything I want to remove, thicken, fatten? One way or another, I have to really, carefully look at this now, because within a couple days, I'm not going to be able to change it. I'm going to be married to this thing, so really want to get that look that I want. And it seems like maybe more than average people, I spend more time on that part of it, just looking at it and trying to decide if I like the canopy or the rudder or the scoop up by the nose or the whatever. You know, the aesthetic part of it is one of the things I really enjoy. Nothing better than some polka music to do your canopy by, or sanding or whatever. Anyway, by pulling these pins out. Trick 1. everywhere there's a pin here, there's going to be a hole down into the fuselage, and of course I'm going to have to seal it up with DAP or whatever. So I want to be real careful not to take out big chunks of wood when I take the pins out. It looks like this is dried up real nice. Now, because I use that epoxy that sands like fiberglass, it's the same epoxy we use on fiberglass cloth, you would think this is going to sand out real nice. It never does. Canopies are always a pain in the ass, no matter how you do them. No matter how you do it. I still haven't found that magic way to do it without having it be a pain. But on this ship, it's going to be probably the focal point of the airplane, so. We also have to take into account here that this top block is relatively thin, and it's not a particularly good piece of wood. There's some hard spots here, so I'm really going to have to be real careful when I sand it out. Now, I don't know how much time we're going to have today, because what we're going to do today, George is supposed to come over and we have that sanding machine, that, how should I say it? We haven't assembled it yet, and we haven't run the electrical wire. We need a 220 wire for it. That dust removal system that Jimmy donated to our cause here. So I don't want to start any big projects. I'm just going to run around here, put in the little pieces of block that are missing and things like that. I don't want to start any big projects today on this. Now this is the back. I'm going to, of course, take a little piece of, well, it looks like 16 sheeting, jam it in there and CA it. Also want to pack this hole. You don't want to have a big hole around the tail wheel where oil can get into the plane. Seal that up, and then I can put the rudder on and get a final sanding, trim this block right off and sand it. Now I can get an idea of just how much of this I want to trim off. And probably what I should do is get a ruler and mark it before I actually trim it. I just want to make sure I'm not moving this. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put some tape on it. Good way to hold this in position so it doesn't start shifting around while we put the final sanding on this. Get a couple pieces of tape. Oh, I love this polka music. Oh my God, I bet you Greenaway's loving this polka music. He wants to know why we don't have boom boxes on these tapes. Forget it. Polka music. Oh, I love my stunt ship. I wish I was Paul Walker. Da, 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 da. I wish I was the Chinese guy. To hell with Paul Walker. I wish I was the world champion, so I could have respect of my friends and play the boom boxes. Okay, enough humor. Now that'll hopefully hold it. Yeah, well, not really. Get a little extra tape on there. Good investment. And we want to block sand this in to some kind of a final shape. This is why you would never make all these final wing tips, and I've gone over that again, the wing tips and the back of the tail and things. You always wait till the very end. Because now, hey, you may want to change this shape a little bit or something. You don't want it to look like something else, even though that rudder looks fine. I think that's going to be fine. This is a good place for that block that we used up by the little hatch by the Raid rudder. This block fits right in here, real nice. As soon as I get a contour here that I'm happy with, I'll take the edge of the rudder off and put a little thin CA on it to harden up the wood so I'm not banging it up and denting it up every 5 minutes. And all this is going to do is just harden up that edge so I don't wind up with losing that edge. That edge is going to be important. Now you would think that I've had enough adventure in my life for the last month or so. Not so. The washing machine just broke. Ugh. So I'm going to have to abandon this project at least for the next couple hours and go over there and try to fix that washing machine. Anyway, that's what life is like here in the Ertnowski house. And while I'm waiting for George to get here, I just CA'd in some little pieces of soft scrap. And I wanted to fill in that hole by the tail wheel. Just get a brand new razor, trim that out, and then I can sand this back in and hit it with some CA. Pretty much the same as the rudder piece. Just want to look at this from all the angles. There's the nice taper back here. Finally, after 6 hours of trying, Jimmy, I'm doing this for you, baby. After 6 hours of trying, we have our dustless system in operation. We had to run a 220 line. It's unbelievable. We had to run a 220 line. We had to disconnect the furnace. We're freezing to death. We had the power switch in backwards. I'm glad I don't have to do this for a living. Anyway, this is a boon to us here. Just wanted to record this moment in history here. Believe me, I had to put the plane away for the whole day. The plane's sitting over there on a bar so George and I could get this system running. All we got to do is hook up a hose clamp and we can run it. We can sand our first piece of wood. This sucks all the dust out of the air. And we hope this is going to be a big boon to our building club. Saying something by that thing. Let's just see. We're running a test with some smoke. Everything goes right in. Now we're going to build a bench. Yeah, that really goes in there, boy. Everything just goes right into this tremendous thing. It runs on 220. What this allows us to do is when we have people here, sand some wood. I want to see how the flakes going in there. Just sand some wood. This you saw before on the video. We had Jeff's idea. And this is like a super Jeff idea. Donated by Jim Damarell, high tech. Alright, it's all going in there. Every bit of dust goes in there. What we're going to do in the near future, and we won't do it today. We're at the end of a very long day. We're going to lose the couch. Build another bench here, and that's actually going to be part of the bench. The hose is going to come through the wall. Just one of our renovation projects here to get the workshop up to snuff. Anyway, that's a killer. That's really good. Yeah, that's super, George. That's going to work great. Now what I did today, I sanded out a little bit over on the plane, and I was trying to use these new tools. This is the first time I've used them. These are rubber. These are these things, I don't even know what they called. Jimmy brought these over. But they come in all different shapes. You can see some of the different shapes they come in. And what I want to make is I found a couple of really good uses for them, especially the smaller ones with the small... again, if you want to know more about these, Jim Damarell is the one you want to give a call to, especially this little fillet tool here. Found some really good uses for them. Now what I did, I took that sticky back sandpaper that we always are using. Where the heck's the... found a great little way to do this too. This is sticky back paper. And get it right up on a corner. And of course, it's because this is a hard rubber, it sticks real nice. And boy, does that make a handy little sanding tool. Now, I was experimenting yesterday trying to find different things I could do with these that would be of value. I found a couple of places that really outstanding how well this works. And you ought to, this can't be an expensive thing. Give it a try. This little guy was extremely helpful where the rudder and the stab come together. This was just perfect. And like I said, I was experimenting off camera to see just where I could use these to my own value. In the back of the tail, where the rudder and the tail come together, it's always such a pain in the neck to get in there. This one was really good. This was one of the best ones. And again, what I did, I put some real smooth sandpaper on here. You can probably even use the stuff that's not sticky back. The flat spots where the cowling, this is nice for where the cowling joint is, getting that joint around the cowling. This is one of the best. Now, because it's rubber, it's real hard, but it gives a little bit if you find a really sharp edge. So you kind of have to just dress each thing off. But very useful, very, very useful. This is the large radius one, and some of the places I found to use this is the cowling, for instance. Inside the cowling here. Here's another great idea. Look how it just almost fits in the exhaust port. Make a nice opening inside the needle valve hole. Just there's ways you have to be a little creative for getting inside here. Inside here it was nice. Inside here I did a complete sanding of the cowling. These things, and as I go on, I'm going to find more and more use for them. This one even has a bigger radius, and again, say you're working in up here, oh, it's always a problem. Using your finger is not a good choice. You don't get nice straight edges. This is just an excellent, I assume an inexpensive tool. I'm going to have to get Jimmy to give me the package on this or the address or whatever. May even think about selling these things, who knows. Anyway, this complements and doesn't take the place of our normal sanding blocks, and we've talked about sanding blocks before. You can't do quality sanding without quality sanding tools. Now what I do, I always put an edge on this, because as you want to get into a corner, you don't want, if you don't have that edge, you're banging up the corner. This is great around fillets. Get the sandpaper on, dress the edge off, and then run some thin CA. See how hard that is? It hardens up the wood and it gives you a nice edge. You can work right in corners. Where you have a corner, you can get in the corner there. I always have one where there's some sandpaper on the edge of the block. Another one of my favorites, I always have the nail polish. This is hard foam. This is for getting radius, outside radius edges. This is an important one. You always want to have that in inventory. You always want to have the good old-fashioned foam block. Good old-fashioned foam block. And I always have a couple extra of these. An assortment. See, one is wider than the other, one has more of an angle than the other. And I always have a rough block, a really rough block for dressing off heavy amounts of material. Bob Martens made me these little blocks. This is plywood. You have a little handle on it, and he glued the 80 grit, 60 grit, or whatever. When you want to get this sandpaper off, just heat it in an oven. Hit it with a torch, just get it warm. The sandpaper peels right off. He made me a bunch of those, in fact. In fact, I gotta put all this on the video now. These are all very helpful little things you need to have. You always want to have a couple of dowels. Always want to have some dowels. And on the dowels, you want to have that old sticky back sandpaper. This is great for getting inside a cowling. Any kind of way you want to get a radius in there. Without these, it may seem like, oh, this is simpleton stuff. This is not. This is why some people's planes have all the right curves and contours, and some people have all these sloppy things they have to fill in with DAP and crap and camel mucus and everything. Sanding tools are a real important part. I'll just give you an example if you had nothing else to work inside of this cowling with. This is just perfect for getting in there. Just an example. Things you need sanding tools for. Always have a couple, all different size shapes with the rough grit, and these are just pieces of scrap balsa. One of the things you want to do, save all your hard balsa. Hard balsa makes the best sanding tools. It's one of my favorites. This is a piece of brass tubing, the sticky back sandpaper. Jim Borelli just bought a couple of rolls of this. I have it over on the bar there. Tonight when he's over here, he's going to be over here tonight, I want to show him some of the other, I hope to have some time to discuss with the other people coming to our party, some of the tricks of how to make this a little easier on yourself. Of course, we always have the big flat blocks, and we have plenty of them, all different grits, all different sizes, shapes, angles. When you get done with your next foam wing course, cut it all up into different angles and shapes. Always have some good sanding blocks made out of foam. You always want to have the hinge slotting tool for dressing off the hinge pockets, and you want to do that right up until you put the color paint on. You want to be able to dress those off, get the nice clean edges. And of course, these are the rolls of the sticky back sandpaper. I don't know what grit this is, 150 here. Now, Jim Damarel brought these over here, and I want to say something nice on the video here. Jim Damarel, this is 220. Jim Damarel has contributed to our cause since he's been working on his plane over here. Many, many nice little items, and I want to give him a nice little thank you. He certainly has been a quality addition to Pro Stunt. Now, in the last day that I've been working on this little guy, and we really have, let me get some lights on over here. I taped off the canopy, of course. I got this spot over here. I have an area I have to work on. I've got the DAP drying up there now. Got some DAP up by the nose part, and of course that'll all get sanded off, almost all of it. You don't want to have any extra DAP. But notice how delicate this fillet, where the block comes into the tail because of the height of the tail. That's a very narrow area. Those little black sanding blocks were just great for getting in there. Up around the scoop, I wanted to get a perfectly flat surface, and the sanding block is a must. You really almost can't do any sanding by hand on the fuselage. It's almost all by block or by rubber block or whatever. Now, I've done most of this off camera. There's still a little bit left to be done. But now one of the last things I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to put the cowling on, put the motor in and the spinner in, and then get everything final fit, all the final little fits. This part of it really is time consuming. It really just takes time. You really just can't rush through this. You can see what's already happened. The Bhagwan himself did this. I was picking a plane up, and when I turned it over, I must have hit a button on my shirt or whatever. Put a little gouge in it. I'm working on all these little areas now, all these little things. Let's get this macro lensed up. This has about 10 coats, just paper thin coats of that nitrous stain, not one big glocky thing. There's some spots on the side of the body here that I had, let's see where I can get at it. Here's one. I wanted to fill in with, let's see if I can get this on. A little difficult here. This seam here, there was a spot in the seam. I'm going to try to find it. I think it's right up here. Yeah, see where the DAP gets into the crack? The block didn't join just right. And that other side by the canopy. Of course, now here's the trick. I've sanded around the edge of the canopy here with the tape in place. Each time I put either paint or CA or whatever on here, I'm going to move the tape up onto the canopy, a 64th, a pencil line, whatever, so that I don't build up a ridge, a crack in there. I want to have this, when this is finished with the clear coat, that you can't even feel that. It'll be perfectly smooth when you feel it. So, that's about where we stand today. Tonight is our big stunt party from hell, I guess is the right way to call it. People that we generally don't see over the winter time. We're hoping to see them tonight, have a little bit of a Christmas party. We'll not be working on this until the end of the weekend. We have our volunteer day coming Sunday. We go and volunteer at an old age home. I'm going to be in an old age home real soon. So we'll probably pick this up with you Monday, or if we get shoot some video at a party tonight. News tomorrow. Happy New Year. Good tidings to you, wherever you are. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. Yay! All right. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Ho ho Ortiz. Who is this masked man? Hey, Mike's having an extra Samuel Adams beer. Look at the tree. Look at this. What a dinner party. Oh my God, we're being serenaded.
See, that's what you gave me. What, Lana? No, I didn't. That's what you gave me. You didn't give me your skin color, but you gave me your... Oh, that was beautiful. That's great.
How's that, Bobby? Pro stunt or what? Cost me $1,000 to have you serenaded.
That doesn't happen in Flushing.
Yeah, you answer the door and they rob you. They rob you.
I gotta answer the door with a gun.
They kick your ass.
What? What do you mean the guy is going to sing Christmas carols in my
Oh, who isn't on the video yet? Here's Debbie Borelli putting her eye makeup on.
Here I am like a jock.
All right, and we have anything to drink tonight. Yay! Are the women drunk yet? Yay!
That was so great.
All right.
I can't believe it. That was so nice. That was so
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, first off today, I want to thank all the people that came to the party. We had a wonderful time, and all the people that gave me gifts. Most important of all, most useful of all to me, the pound of gummy bears Peggy Ortiz gave me. I still haven't, feel like I'm going to explode. Anyway, Joe Ortiz gave me a real nice, it's similar to a Swiss Army knife, and it has all kind of things you can use at the field, Allen wrenches and Phillips screwdrivers. I'm going to use that in my toolbox, of course. What I tried to do over the weekend is I had a little bit of time. I made myself up a list because there's about 7 or 8 other little things I want to do on this guy, and I want to do them in a methodical order. One of the things I want to do is I want to put some fiberglass on the nose here. The last couple of planes I've had, at the end of a lot of, maybe 100 flights, there's all kind of ring marks and things from picking them up like this. And the glass isn't really what you would think it is, so you could leave out the plywood or the motor mounts or something. What it is I'd really like to protect the nose and keep the nose from getting all beaten up. Tsunami is all beaten up. The Red Baron has ring marks from 10 different people on it. I hope that'll help some without adding more than maybe 1/4 ounce of weight or whatever. I also want to make the little flap fillets, and I made my little list of things that I want to do here. Now at this point in time, we're working on a helter-skelter schedule. It's almost Christmas, and every day is Christmas shopping. Taking our daughter to Peru. We got all kind of things to do here. So by making up a list, it ultimately saves me a lot of time. The first thing I want to do is get with making up these little fillets. They connect the flaps into the body. That's a relatively easy job, so I guess, being I'm still half asleep, I guess I'll start with that this morning and then work into some of the harder stuff. Now the first step is I want to get this pushed up onto the wing as hard as I can so I know I have the right hinge gap. And I'm going to go get myself, now you would think, oh, I'll get a piece of 1/4 inch wood, same as the flap. No, what you need is 3/8 wood because the trailing edge is just a little bit thicker than this, and you want to get a blend right in. You don't want to have it that it gets to here and then goes up. So the first thing is I'll go into that scrap box, try to get a nice piece of scrap, lay it in here and get a template made up. Same as we've been doing, and I hope this little idea of templating things is a big help to you. We want to make a little template up of the size we need out of maybe an old piece of 16th and then trace it out onto the real wood that we're going to use. And this is the system I really like to use, is by making little patterns. Now, obviously you could take the piece that you're going to use, the official piece, I feel like I'm in the Army, the real piece, and do this, but it's easy. I think it's easier if you just make a pattern up. Always make it a little longer than it has to be. I like to make it a little longer, and I'll get that little bit of a curve in there, and then it isn't really important to get the curve the way you want it. You get the final sanding in there. There's a little pattern. Just make sure we have a nice tight fit, and then we can block sand it in. Okay. Now, using that little 16th pattern, I'm using up a piece of old 3/8 wood. I want to make it, it's always easier to make everything oversized and then block sand it right into position. If you try to use 1/4 inch wood, it's going to be difficult, and it's not really going to have, the blend at the trailing edge is always going to have a little ripple in it. All right, I'll cut this out with the jigsaw. Okay, now the first thing we know, on here we're going to have a little relief for the horn, so I'll get out a piece of either 1/8 inch wire or whatever. First thing I want to do is get that little cup Now here's one thing you can do. I just notched this out with an X-Acto knife. Is take some of that sticky back sandpaper and a toothpick, just about an 1/8 inch, and get that gouge out for the horn. Make it a little oversized. You don't want to have any binding there, that's for sure. I always like to leave that hole a little bit oversized. Dress off the edge real nice, and of course do a little test fit. Now that wants the butt right up to the flap nice and tight, and just leave just enough clearance around the horn. Now if you do a little test fit, you'll find a spot. In this case we're hitting right up in the front of the flap. Make sure the flap is pressed and just dress it off till you get a nice fit. Remember, we want to have that real nice fit on these fillets. It looks like it's okay. Now we want to press that right up against it. Okay, now I'm going to try to cut the taper. I'm going to try this. No guarantee this is going to work. I'm going to hold this, get this on center, get the flap in the middle here, and just get a line. Okay, now that's where that's going to be. Okay, now I know that's where the flap edge is going to be. Now what I want to do, I want to try to taper this just a little bit up. I don't want to make it exactly the same. I want to have a little bit of a taper up, just about a 2-degree taper, like a draft angle, and then radius off this whole back edge before I even go to fit it in again. Just a slight taper down. It's a great place to use this little, we have the dowel. It'll give us a nice radius. Radius that back edge in, the sticky back sandpaper. And now of course we just want to run over and do a couple little test fits and just keep ice shaving this down until it's about exactly, well, close or exactly the way we want it. Now you see I've left the pencil line on there, the pen line, because what I want to do now is go over and fit this in position and little by little dress this down just to the point where I'm going to either remove the line or just leave the line. Got the back end all radiused in nice, and boy, that tool makes it a piece of cake to get the radius nice. Oh, there goes my pacemaker. Oh no, I'm going to die. Now the most critical thing is how this fits up here. You don't want to have a big, you want to have a smooth transition in there. Now it looks like, and I want to have it of course on center, real close. And see, I'm just going to dress this off. See, when I hit this, I'm taking a little step up. Just the slightest little bit, I'm going to dress that off. Now I also want to make sure I don't do this. I don't glue this like this or this. I want to get that right on center. Right on center is very important. Now after a lot of ice shaving and sanding and getting this just about as close as I possibly can now, last step is I want to draw a little line on here with my pen. I want to do what I always do with other stuff, and I want to hollow this out a little bit. Hey, you might think, oh, you only save a few grains doing this. Well, every time you save a few grains, just you're improving the breed just a little bit, I think, anyway. And of course, we're behind the CG here, so anything we can do here is going to multiply by some ratio up in the nose. And I'll just hollow this out with a little Dremel tool, just maybe to 1/8 inch wall thickness. This is the bit I like to use. It's just a little bit more than an 1/8 inch, so it should just be very handy for just carving a little ditch in there. Every little bit of weight you can save, needless to say, has got to help you somewhere. Now that old toothpick and sticky back sandpaper will really make a nice cut in here for you. In fact, one of the things I wanted to try, I wanted to start using these rubber things. I had a small one in here. Maybe I can try this with some sticky back. I can use the back edge of this, in fact. Oh yeah, that fits right in there. And when I do the final sanding on the fuse, of course, I'll use all these rubber little things, and I'll see where I can use each one and of what possible way to use this where it could be the most efficient. One of the sloppiest things I've ever seen even on my own planes is when you have a perfect wing and tail, a perfect silver, and then you don't take enough time to sand the body, and you got all little hippity hose and horse's ass things hanging out and stuff. I really don't want to rush the sanding of the body. And this is ready to glue on. And needless to say, I'll just make sure I get the alignment just as close to perfect as I can. Now, as always, I want to make sure the flaps are in perfect neutral. Okay. I want to press the fillet in. Any high spots I can still take care of. And I want to mark where I think this is going to be in neutral. By taking this piece of wood away, I can see if I'm equally high and low. But most of all, that the flap is in neutral before I tack this in. And that it's a nice press fit. And we can just dress that off just so there's no resistance there at all. Now what I like to do is slow dry in thick CA. So give me a second or two to position, and some IBM cords. And some IBM cords will just hold the clearance there until that kicks off. I'd like it to dry without kicker. Try to keep a little pressure forward on this. I can feel, yeah, it's starting to kick off now. You can take the IBM cords out. You notice you have a nice even clearance down the whole flap edge. Now, filling in this little gap here, there's always a little gap. We need a little piece of scrap wood. We're just going to lay it in there, right in that gap. And what you have to do is take a little wedge and sand it like a little cedar shake shingle to get the shape that you need. I'll show this on a macro lens. I'm just trying to get a little fit here. Pretty close. Okay, you can see that little piece. It's not even glued in yet, but before I glue it in, I'm pressing it down, and I'll just try to drop a thin CA in, and notice it comes out onto the wing, because I'm trying to avoid that ripple there. I want to have a smooth transition. Again, it's all little details, because we really want to make an effort at having all the details in order here. Now, the big secret here is to try to drop the CA onto it. Don't let the tip of the tube touch it. If you do, it's going to stick to the tube. Okay. Now, except for a final sanding, that's ready. I'll do the bottom off camera, and I'll just repeat everything for this side, and we should have a nice matching set of fillets, and then I'll start the sanding in operation. Now, just as a reminder of what I've been doing, and I haven't been doing it on camera, but I'll do a little bit here. All the little spots I've been finding, and I banged up this wingtip, and I won't tell you how embarrassing it is to run the wingtip into the wall or whatever hell happened to you. Drinking on a job. But I am on an ongoing way, and what this does, it gives each day, like a day like today, I get 1 or 2 extra coats of filler on here, let them all sand out, gives me a little head start on it. Nope, got to get the phone. See, and this is that ongoing thing. I'm fixing that flap. Out here I got this wingtip. Now while I have one fillet cooking away here, I got another coat of filler on here. I can fix that. Now the nice thing about building a plane where you have removable flaps like this, now I can get in here. When I do the other side, I'll sand them both at once. And I can sand both of these without the flapping away, banging into my hand and everything. I can get in here and get the nice smooth transition contour. By the way, where that transition is where you usually have fillets bubbling up, and anyway, it's nice when you can pull the flaps off. Okay, again, I say I'll do the other one off camera just to save some tape. But this is a nice thing if you have this idea in your mind, ongoing repair. Every time you see a little ding, hey, take a little 5-minute break here, fix the ding. It's always a lot easier to do it this way. Okay, I got the both fillets now roughed in. I got the flaps being repaired. I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes just to make sure the CA is kicked off. And what I want to do is put a little radius back here at the, you know, I always want things to match, needless to say. I want to have that same little curve back here. I've been real careful to make sure that the wing tips match the stab tips, which kind of matches the rudder. So I don't want fillets where this one is straight and this one is curved. I'd like this one to be curved. And all I'm going to have to do is add a little piece in here, a little curved piece, and then blend it in. Now to make that little piece back there, I'm going to take, it's about an 1/8 inch. I'm going to take 2 pieces of 1/16. I have some thin CA, thick CA. Laminate them together. That'll give me a little extra strength. It'll also give me a center line to work off at the same time. I'll just let this kick off, and then of course we'll make a pattern and trace it onto our laminated piece of wood. Then we'll make a pattern for this side first. It's real nice if you get used to working with patterns. Patterns just really save you time. I'd like to get this to go kind of in a matching radius. In fact, I can use the same sanding tool and I'll have real close to being the same radius. Now, one of the ideas of using this laminated wood here is I can get the grain to go corner to corner on this. So you don't want the grain, what's going to happen is this little edge here is very vulnerable. What will happen if I do it this way, it's not vulnerable at all. I want to get the grain going corner to corner. It'll be a heck of a lot stronger and it'll be a lot easier to sand in. I won't be breaking the edge 100 times. Because I have that laminated joint in there, leave it a little oversized, and I can just sand it in with that dowel with a piece of sandpaper on it. Now whenever you have laminated ball supply, you really want to cut it with a saw, because where the knife's going to go through the joint, you're going to get an angle. It's not going to come out perfect. Now, so from the pattern I have my piece cut out now. Now I can just do a final sanding here, fit, and get this radius in with that dowel with the sandpaper on it. And the dowel, of course, give us a real nice radius here. You could also use a sanding drum if you really want to be cute. Now that back edge where it's going to go right into the back of the stab fillet, I want to put a little radius in there. Good old sticky sandpaper and a toothpick gives me a nice radius. I get a nice clean fit. Now last but not least, I can take the dowel and the sandpaper and get a little bit of a radius, just a little bit on both sides. Give me a little head start on the sanding. And of course I'll do the other side off camera, and then we'll be ready to start sanding these guys right in. Okay, the other side is ready to be done, and we'll just repeat this whole thing over and over till we get the other side on. Now, next step, I got all the flaps, elevators, rudder, everything off, so I have some room to work in here. I'm going to start sanding in my fillet areas using, and again, I'm going to use a full variety of these tools on all different areas, and I'll try to figure out where I can best use some of the sanding blocks with the points, some of the straight edges, but I'd like to get all the areas that are going to become fillets sanded in now. Now that tool we had, that rubber tool with the big radius, that's real convenient for getting in here, radius and off both sides of this curve. You know, without having to belabor the point, you can use this on any curve, but this will make them all the same radius. Very handy tool. Now you'll probably find some other handy ways to use these if you just experiment a little bit. And again, I'm just experimenting as I go. The biggest of the radius one seems just about the right size. As soon as you get the radius that you really want on there, you can hit it with a little CA. That'll harden it up and keep you from busting it up every time you get near it. Now here's where you want to have that point so you don't go running up into the rudder. You can continue this little angle right here. In fact, we can get this whole fillet area at this time. One smooth swoop. Now the whole trick here is you don't want to see the seam, of course. This net is nice and smooth. Now you put a couple of coats of thin CA on there. Don't kick it, just wipe it with a paper towel. And I'll get some real fine sandpaper and just blend that right in, and then go right down and get that radius in there. And when I start doing the dope on this edge, the dope on this, I'll come right out over there. This will harden this up and make for a real smooth, real neat, kind of sanitary look. Now again, as soon as I get this, I have it all sanded out with the real fine sandpaper. I'll get a final little coat of CA on here because you're constantly going down into the raw wood here, down through the filler. Get the edge, around the radius of the edge. That's one of the important parts because that's where it's going to be vulnerable and delicate until you get some dope and filler on this. And try not to kick it with kicker, just let the cotton or the paper towel lint do the kicking. And this is just a repeat process. Go back over it 4 or 5, and go over it 100 times, who cares? Back and forth with the thin CA, kick it off, dress off all the edges. Now you always want to work right down toward that corner. That corner is the area of, well, I really like to get perfect. I like to get a perfect 90-degree corner in there. And each time you do this, you have to get down in there and clean that ditch out. In fact, there's still a little bit in there. Now I got a little blob of CA right in the crack itself, right in the bottom. What's good is I'm taking a 26 blade with some sticky back sandpaper, and this will work right down into the corner. Now one of the things you can do is take a nice 26 blade and just cut the point off so it's nice and flat. That allows you to get right into that corner. Again, once you have that shape you want, of course we're down into the raw wood here in spots. Thin CA, rub it in with a Q-tip, let it kick naturally. And of course, we'll do the rest of this off camera. Most of the work in these curves and corners is just a question of finding the right tool. Get all your tools handy, all these little pointy things, X-Acto knives with sandpaper on them. Makes the job so easy. Of course, what you always want to try to do at the very end of sanding out a fillet is go from one end to the other and carry that angle. Start right at the leading edge, right back. This is what's nice about having a tail in silver now. I can see every little high spot and low spot because of the silver. Just carry it right back. This area right up here where they launched the plane from is always vulnerable. So what I've done is I've taken the first 2 inches in front of this and soaked the whole wood with thin CA, because you always have these klutzes that grab the plane there and leave ring marks and watch marks and everything in there. But now the wood is hard. The thin CA has made the wood hard. I can get in there with a little block and dress that whole area off. And I see as soon as I'm hitting the silver, I know I can't sand any further. Having the right tools here, the right little sanding blocks, is what makes all this not super easy, but it just makes it doable and predictable instead of being impossible and aggravating. Having all these nice little blocks. Save them all, use them all. Find spots where you can use them. Without sanding blocks, you're never going to have that really nice fuselage like I would assume, all the people in the top row, the judges, are intelligent enough to see a fuselage that isn't sanded out well. And this is just a time-consuming. In fact, I'm not gonna belabor this too much. This could go into a whole tape of its own. Just working on these areas, work with the various tools. Now I got this side pretty well done too. I'm not gonna do the bottom here. What I'm gonna do, and this is a good idea you can use on your own plane from time to time, is I only have about another half an hour to spend here, and then we're going out Christmas shopping. So, what I want to do, I want to get that glass on the nose and the glass on the cowling next. The reason for that is, now that could be drying overnight, and it's so much easier to sand when you let it dry an extra day. I'm probably going to dry 2 or 3 days because we have a lot of house things, family things to do. But if you know you're not going to work on a model for a couple days, put some dope on, put some fiberglass, put something that can be drying while you're out doing your family stuff. So the last thing I'm going to do here on this, before I put it away, I'm going to put some thick CA in here and just wipe my finger, just to harden up that wood, get that wood hardened up. And that's the last thing I'm going to do on that fillet today. Now what I'm doing, and this is just to harden up the wood, thick CA. Run a real nice bead right down the whole fillet line. Take your little pinky or your nose or something pointy. Rub it in. Go right around the edge where you want this to harden up. Wipe your finger with a paper towel. Go right down a second time. All that's doing is hardening up the wood on both sides. Don't kick it. Let it dry naturally. That'll harden up the wood quite a bit. Now I got both sides kind of flattened out. You notice, I don't know if you can see in the video, each time I block sand this out, I go further out onto the silver, so I get a nice blend where it comes in. Same thing on this side, and of course radius all the edges. Radius the edges each time you do it. I've got this real, to the touch, this feels beautiful now. I'm really happy with that. And like I said before, I'm not going to even bother doing the bottom of it now. What I want to do is, I want to get this guy flipped over, do a final sanding on the nose, get the cowl and the nose glassed, so that that's going to be drying while I'm, family things. What can I tell you? Anyway, it's near Christmas, and that's all she wrote, man. Now, before glassing that, what I did, sanded rough, real rough, got this whole thing blended into where I'm happy with it. And I notice there's one little gap here I want to fill. And I just want to see how far up I can go. I almost can go the whole length. There's a gap here, and what I'll do is I'll glue this 64th plywood right to the fuse, and then I'll taper this end up here. Now, it'll always be better if you pre-taper it. Taper a wood, because you want it to blend. Pre-taper one side of it up here till it just kind of disappears on one end, and then we'll do the final fit once this is in place. Now, you really don't want to use balsa. You definitely want to use plywood to fill this so it's nice and hard. Now this will be a little oversized, and we'll just trim the thickness till that cowl fits nice and tight. You want to get all your fitting done before you put the glass. The glass should be the final thing that's going to hold the shape. Now what I'll do, I'll just tighten up the screw here. Good idea too, at this point in time, take all your Allen bolts out of the motor mounts and out of the cowl mounts, put some WD-40 or some kind of oil on them, Vaseline, oil, grease, so that you don't have epoxy dripping down into the blind nuts. Put all the bolts in place. Now this is just sticking out just a little bit. Now I got the 320 and a block, and I want to get everything just contoured in here. Once this is contoured in, the glass will lay nice and flat. We won't be sanding through the glass all over the place. You want to get all your sanding done before you go out. Before you go and glass anything, all the sanding should be finalized, at least with 320. Everything radius. All your fits for needle valves and pressure fittings and who knows what. Everything radius with a final radius before we glass. Again, an X-Acto knife with the sticky sandpaper wrapped around it makes a great blade for getting in corners and angles. Harden up all the edges with thin CA, that's always a must. And get one final radiusing on there. Now, because you have a reverse curve here, the dope is going to tend to shrink and pull out of here. So what I want to do is get the first coat. I want to get a coat of thin CA, a nice generous coat. What this will do is harden up the wood. Don't let it kick off, just run it back and forth with a paper towel. It'll harden up the wood and give you a good base. Don't stop the towel or it'll glue the towel in. That hardens up the wood. We're not going to glass in there. This is just something to harden up the wood. Now the last thing, I want to get a coat of thick CA in here. Just wipe it with the paper towel. Don't stop the paper towel or you'll wind up gluing a paper towel to the wood. Leave a nice coating in there. That'll give us a good base to put our paint on. Good penetration into the wood. Just let it dry. Okay, we're just going to let that kick off normally. Don't put any kicker on it. Otherwise it's going to turn to popcorn. And actually what we'll do while we're waiting for that is we'll get a final sanding on the cowl and get ready to glass the cowl. Make sure everything's free of dust. Get all the dust off here. A nice clean table to work off. As with all glassing, the only glass resin you want to use is the one where SIG makes it and one tube is bigger than the other. Everything else I've had less good results with. Now in this case what I'm going to do, I marked this up. I got some 7.5 ounce cloth rather than half inch. Half ounce cloth is okay, but then you have to put layer after layer around things. I want to try to do this whole thing with 7.5 ounce. If it doesn't work out so well, I'll just sand, as much of it off as I can. But this is going to be a test, and I'll try doing the cowling with 7.5 here. Now always make the piece of cloth you're going to use plenty big. Boy, these scissors are dull from cutting tin cans and whatever. Hey, anybody wants to send me a new pair of scissors, I appreciate it. Gotta sneak up and use the wife's scissors later. Alright, just a big old piece of cloth. Step one. Now just mix up the epoxy. It's always convenient to find something you can hold here. Get a good thick glommy coat of this stuff on. Let it soak in. Let it penetrate in. Now usually you have about 15 minutes of working time here. And no matter how many times you pull the cloth off, move it, whatever you do, you have plenty of time. Most people just get a little panicky, I think. Any of the weak spots on here that, like around here, would be kind of weak, maybe we'll even get a second little bridge of glass on there. And just lay it on indiscriminately. Use your fingers to pull it down. You're probably going to wind up with some wrinkles or some places you have to run a razor blade into it. This looks like it's going to go right on relatively easily. Leave plenty hanging off. That's one of the best tips. In the front here, we're going to have to hit it with a razor blade probably. Get it to stick down. Now what I like to do is just get a little extra epoxy on here, and then I'm going to start hitting this with a hairdryer. I want plenty of material on there before I start sloshing it off. As soon as you hit it with the hairdryer, it's going to get nice and liquidy. You can almost see it getting wet. As soon as it gets a little wet, take one of the little spatulas and just start scraping it off, little by little. Because really, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to glass things. Just a little bit of technique. If you've never done it before, you might want to practice on an old balsa block or whatever just to get the technique down. And being this is the cowling, you don't want to try to make it super light and get every little bit off. Hey, leave a little bit extra on there. It'll give you something to sand into. Okay, we're pretty much going to repeat the same procedure. We'll mix up new epoxy for the nose, of course. Nothing really different about this. Now what you see is, I waited a couple of minutes here, this is starting to kick off. When you hit it with heat, it starts to get sticky and tacky. And all the little spots that don't want to sit down, you just keep brushing them with the spatula. You don't care about any of the edges. The edges, as soon as this dries, we can sand the edges right off, razor them off, whatever. And right in here you have a reverse curve, so I'm just patting it down, kind of babysitting it, that old word babysitting it. Babysit it right down. Give it a little time to tack out before we actually go do the nose. This will add a lot of durability. And boy, out in Flushing Meadow and at the Circle Burner Field, some of these people that launch your plane, boy, unbelievable. They go launch it with vice grips and everything. I'm sure every plane that's out at Flushing has one or two Mike Roger ring marks on it. Anyway, it's a good idea too if you're going to be a helper or whatever. You're going to launch other people's planes. Lose the jewelry, lose the watches. Don't go out there trying to look like Benny Goodman or something with all kind of bejeweled shit hanging off your body. Go out there like the naked warrior. Okay, that's about right. I'm going to put this aside and get ready to do the nose. Now, a good place to let it dry is similar to this, where all the cloth can be draping off and hanging. You don't want to have the cloth pull up away. And I'm going to put this up by the heating vent to dry. Heating vent will help cure it. So you've got the heating vent up there, and this will be a big help. Let the heat blow on it all night. Help cure it. Now before you start the second, we're going to mix another batch of epoxy. You don't want any of the original batch of epoxy in with the old, so it's a good idea to clean all the tools off, clean your hands, get a brand new IBM card. Never mix a batch that's half cured with a new batch. Clean off all the tools, clean your hands, and we'll start laying out that piece for the nose. Now I have to have some way of holding this steady while I'm working on it, because of course I'm working alone. If I have another person here, it would be real nice. So what I'm going to do is cover the wings and the tail with blankets. I want the whole nose sticking out in midair. Of course, if you have one of these finishing friends or Polish friends or something, you can have this. I want it exposed maybe from the high point of the wing forward. I don't want it sitting in the cradle, and I want it nice and solid so I can trowel off the epoxy. Okay, I cut a piece of cloth a little bit oversized. I'm going to get this piece right up to the leading edge. Kind of wrap it around. Leave a lot extra on the bottom. Maybe it'd just be better going around flushing, cutting everybody's finger off that has a ring that launches your plane. Alright, next thing, I'll mix up the epoxy on this. Now I'm just cutting up a couple little scraps. I might want to put a double piece over where the hardwood meets the balsa, and maybe down here a little piece. I don't know yet. I'm just going to cut up a bunch of little scraps that I might be able to use. Now when you're doing a big section like this, I like to mix up about double the amount I normally need, because a lot of it's going to wind up just getting troweled off. And then in the middle of doing it, I don't want to wind up having to mix some more. By the way, there is a thing you can do to make yourself a problem, is not mixing this epoxy well enough. This epoxy really needs more mixing than you think it does. Okay. I'm just going to spatula this right on. Now believe me, years ago, what people used to do, and boy, it was found out not to be a good thing. They'd leave out the motor mounts or drill holes in things or do any kind of crazy thing and then just glass the nose with half-ounce cloth and think, that'll do it. Well, if you do that, you're risking trouble. What I say is do all the construction the right way, leave the mounts the way they should be, the doublers and everything, and then put some glass on there for insurance. And the insurance is really more for the people that are picking a plane up, and they always seem to pick it up right by the nose. It's so aggravating. And you really can't holler at them. A lot of them are bigger than I am, you know. Hey. So anyway, we hope this is going to be a little insurance against. And what we're looking for again here is the long haul. You know, this is not a plane that's made for one season, go to the Nats, and then it's a Kleenex disposable airplane. I expect a lot of years out of old Strega here, hopefully. Or at least if I get done with him and he's still in nice shape, you know, I can pass him on to somebody who can learn from him or benefit from him. But if you build a piece of junk that has no life expectancy, no, there ain't no point even giving it away, let alone trying to let somebody learn from it. And the proof is in the pudding. A lot of my older planes are still flying. A lot of them still look halfway decent. They're not all cracked up and noses falling off of them and everything. Anyway, enough bragging. And you can't say that about everybody. There's an awful lot of people. You look around and boy, at the end of a year, the plane is really starting to self-destruct. So even if you just see this once, this is really the first time we're doing it on, I think this is the first time actually we're doing it on video, so I'm going right around the bottom, and depending on what the bottom block is or the shape of the bottom, you may have to improvise a little bit. Okay, plenty of goop on there. In fact, we'll go back even just a little bit further here. Now we could blend in where the epoxy is going to end and where it's going to be raw wood. Just like glass in a wing, we'll blend it in with a little alcohol or acetone, so you won't be a whole lot of sanding. But again, remember the big trick here, big trick. this stuff has to dry. If you can let it dry 2 or 3 days, and that's why we're doing this. Normally we would do the fillets all in one, in one shot, but I want to get this dry. And now even if I work on the fillets, the next time I have a session, at least this is drying, and I'm 1 step ahead. Well, I just love being 1 step ahead instead of 1 step behind. Okay, just drop this puppy right in. Oh, that's nice. I did it backwards. Okay. Try to get it right up to the leading edge if we can. Use that little technique, pat it down with your fingers. You can pull it up as many times as you want, obviously, just like silk span. Just pat it down, stretch it. Whatever hangs off, don't even worry about it. It's not a problem. Right up here is where I really want to have it. Okay. Just like silk span, it's a little messy. Have a little towel handy with some acetone or alcohol on it. Once you get it all patted down, you can take the trowel, a little bit of heat, get off the extra epoxy. A little bit of technique here. Nothing you can't pick up in a little practice session. Hey, and even if you have to practice, go get an old piece of 2x4 or something and glass it just for practice. Get the feel of the material. If you have a top and a bottom side, always do the bottom side first so you get your technique down pat. Okay, good thing we have all this old rags around here. Okay, we can get rid of the extra epoxy, get out an acetone can. You always need something to wipe it off with. Always easier to start at the top and work to the bottom. Just let it drool off. Go right around the fuselage, right around in one shot here almost. Now the idea is to take the extra off, but don't take it all off. Don't get it down to where you have nothing holding the material on. And now I can start like a little bit of a stretching motion. Starting at the top and working my way down as the epoxy gets warm. Wipe it off on a can of acetone, can of anything really. Can of Budweiser. By the way, I checked out that little tool that Joe Ortiz gave me for Christmas. That is a handy little tool. It's like a model airplane Swiss Army knife. Kind of nice. I'll try, if I have any time at the end of this video, I'll show it. I've been using it every day here, and it's a handy thing. Hey, I really have more time here than you think you do. There's plenty of time to do this. Just let the edges drool right off, just like a shower curtain. And boy, if you can put this aside to dry 2 or 3 days or over a weekend, work on something else, make wheel pants or something, boy, this stuff sands so nice. It's a pleasure to sand it. You try to sand it the next day, yeah, you can sand it, but it's a lot of extra work. Now where the glass ends, needless to say, you want to go beyond it 1 inch or so with the epoxy. So you're not, when you do sand this, you're not going to sand, soft wood right into hard glass. You want to have a little transition period in there, if you possibly can. I think that's going to about do it. We'll turn some heat on in the house now so that a little bit of heat will just kick this off and I'll babysit it. I want to put a little extra piece up here at the nose. I think I'll do that right now too. Now when you want to add a little, I'll call it a patch for lack of a better word. I made up some of these little patch-like things. Just go right over the old glass. Bring it out over the nose ring here. We got some of the original epoxy if we want to smear it right in there. And you can go around and make all little patches. Any spot you think is going to be vulnerable, make a little patch. And of course you can double and triple layer this however, you know, whatever turns you on. Whatever you think you're going to need. Now we'll just put this aside to dry. Let's hope, you know, dries up nice next couple of days. Again, just as a constant reminder, the longer you let it dry, the easier it's going to be to sand. Now this is this little gizmo that Joe Ortiz gave me. It's made out of some kind of space age material, I don't know what. It's really almost indestructible though. And it's got all kind, now hard to believe, this is a wire cutter. You can put the wire in there right at the field, you can cut wire. I'm just going through this one by one. There's Allen wrenches. The only problem with the whole tool is there isn't a 632 Allen wrench. There's the size bigger and a size smaller. It turns into a giant Allen wrench. The other side is like a Swiss Army knife. It's a screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, more Allen wrenches, who knows what else. Anyway, if you want any information on this tool, and it's a great thing for the toolbox, keep you from having 92 different tools in your toolbox. I would also suggest if you get one, engrave your name on it, because it's kind of a little handy thing. The kind of thing people will use once, put in their pocket, or wind up being in their toolbox. Anyway, give Joe Ortiz a call. He's in the pamper list. It's a good little tool. I've used it. I leave it right on my workbench here, and in the summer I'll put it in the flight box. I just want to mention one of the advantages of, this is of course my new work table I'm so proud of. One of the things that really is handy about building a plane this way, you can see I've got some of the repair work. I even have a coat of filler on this. Little spots as I'm going along. I have a half hour here, an hour here. The phone rings or whatever, and I'll sit and sand out a spot. I can pick away at all. I don't know if there's any on here. Anyway, pick away at my little bad spots. Rather than just wasting time, I can think about how I'm going to do up these exhaust stacks. Joe Adamusco's looking to buy some of this tubing with a 90-degree bend in it. Anyway, it's just handy. I have some of the parts for the number 2 plane there. It's handy. The next couple days we really have to put this aside to dry. We're almost at the end of this tape, and I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. I've said it 100 times. The whole deal with building the way that Harold Price taught me years ago, bringing everything up to silver, what's handy right now is all of these little time. Like I can pick away at this tip. There's some spots in the back I can work on. I still have to do the fillets. We'll do that on the next tape. I cut the glass cloth out of the hatches just so it wouldn't dry with big globs of glass cloth there. Anyway, this way allows me to work on all my little details. Right now I can, while this is drying, even an extra day, it'll be dried at a touch by tomorrow. I can pick away at that. I can work that fillet out by the canopy. I can detail the plane, and it's those details. It always seems like you line up all the front row planes at the Nats and one of them just jumps right out and says, oh. And an example of that is skis, Bussos, Casminados, Ted Fanchers. They all just seem to have that little bit extra. Just a little bit extra. And that's what we're striving for with this plane. So anyway, we'll put this guy aside to dry. Look around the shop. We're real happy since we have the new bench and we have the extension on our plane rack and we have various other things. The next thing to go, hopefully within the next week or so, the couch is history. We're going to get our big vacuum out here, make it part of our shop. Looking forward to really, boy, I'll tell you, Christmas time. Looking for, I always have a plane in the works around Christmas time. And this guy, so far I'm real happy with the way he looks. I'll be working out some paint job ideas and whatever before we get to the next tape. So, with no further ado, we'll see you on the next tape.